I wanted to kind of switch to what you were going through as parents of you don't know, you think you're going to go back in a couple months. At month 2, 3, at what point do you think, okay, I don't know if we're going to go back? Like, did you continue to have hope? How long did that hope last, thinking you were going to go back and get your children?
I didn't dare not hold on to that hope, and I could only hold on for 1 week, and then I would just start over again, and it was like my life was put on pause, because it was. I spent the time mourning the death of all of my children,
Because that's essentially what it was.
and you just have to hold on to the hope. You can't let go.
In a nutshell, it's complete survival mode. You got to survive this, and yes, I hope that if there is a God, which you can't believe that there isn't, there is a God. He knows all the suffering, and we're suffering intensely. We just got to get through it, and we got to please this horrible God that's making us go through this, so to speak. But we didn't think of it at the time as him being a horrible God. But
And I think that was part of their strategy, is to keep you in survival mode so you didn't question anything. You know, you did exactly what they said and they could use you.
Did you guys have each other during that at all? Were you able to lean on one another?
To a degree, because he worked 7 days a week, and he worked all day long. So we would talk and say, "Hey, okay, you're still alive," but that was pretty much it. I was working too, but I was home a little more than you were at the house. So I rented a house, and he ended up having a trailer on the house.
on the property, I lived in a camp
because we
trailer on
couldn't
the
live
property.
together. We lived in Nebraska and went through lots of tornadoes with him in the trailer.
And we didn't realize it was tornado weather. And at first, then my separate roof was a tent. I lived in a tent every night, even when there was tornadoes out there. So for your viewers out there, anybody, I did say if there is a God, oh, I guarantee there is a God, because a tornado could have taken me away. But yeah, there's a God that kept me here for a reason.
And that whole time you're staying in the tent, it's all under the assumption of you trying to be obedient to what Warren Jeffs is expecting of you as a couple.
Yeah, and just constantly sending those letters in, just practically begging to just be good enough to get a chance to just check on them and make sure they're okay. I got to the point where you'd break down, and we didn't dare sleep, because you'd think, like, I had just worked so hard till I was so tired that when I did go to sleep, I'd just fall right to sleep, and then the minute I woke back up, I'd get up and just be
Same reason
tearing into
why
the work.
I worked 7 days a week.
Because you just couldn't allow yourself to feel when we finally did, and you just break down. I could be in public. I remember one day we went out to grab something to eat, and I just broke down and wept in front of there's no way to explain why. There was nobody we could tell what the stress we were under. We weren't supposed to be speaking to anybody out in the world, because if we did, then we wouldn't get our kids back and we wouldn't be able to go back. That was the driving force. We'll go back. The thing I wanted the most in this world was to go back to Colorado City and get my kids and be there and live there.
Exactly.
And be under Warren. Because now there was a driving force. And so, it even drove, it kind of was forcing you to even drive your testimony. Like, I know there's a God, and he's going to tell Warren to tell me those letters were never opened. The letters were sent in to get help. There's piles and piles and piles of letters that were sent in for help. None of them are open. If they didn't have a pile of money in them, they weren't opened.
I'd like to real quick describe a very, very difficult situation that we went through shortly after we had gone. We were both working at Walmart at the time, because it was before I got the other job that I got where I was working 7 days a week. And I knew it was temporary because I'd already applied for this other job. However, we were there working at Walmart, and it was during the time when all of the mothers and children of the FLDS were killed in the flood that happened in Colorado City. And
There's a family.
that was bad enough, not knowing anything about our kids, or if our kids
Well,
had,
there's a family and their last name was White.
Right.
We could get no
and if our kids had
information.
been killed or not, and we just had to hold out hope that the bishop would really call us if one of them had been killed. And to couple that with all of the emotion that we had dealt with, we're dealing with, being out there without our kids, not knowing anything, and then it came across the news, which is how we found out, in the break room at Walmart, and there was people from Nebraska who were saying, "Oh, these stupid FLDS people, if they were just better people, then this wouldn't have happened, and they wouldn't have been killed." And here we are, and hear people say this, and we can't say one word at all. That was the worst torture. I hope nobody ever has to suffer, but it was not easy to bear or to go through.
And that's why we're so grateful for you guys all being willing to share your story so that people can understand that it's not so simple. You can't just look at people and say, "Oh, why don't they just do this?" or "Why don't they just do that?" You can't judge people like that because you don't know their full story. You don't understand the pressures and the indoctrination and their whole life being surrounded by obedience to that with the hope of eternal salvation as a carrot. As you said earlier, at what point, what was the turning point? Because
Yeah. When did you finally hear about something?
Not until I all of a sudden got a phone call out of the blue from
I
my
can actually tell that. Sorry, go ahead.
oldest daughter, and the first thing she said was, she said, "Father, hear me out and do not hang up."
And he's thinking, why would I
And
hang up?
I'm like, if you're calling me, it's for a reason. And she had no clue that there is no way that I would have hung up.
Well, she
ever.
was being told your parents will not listen to you.
Yeah.
They were being told that they were contacting us and we were telling them what to do for the kids and what to do with the kids. So
And
they were
and that
being
we
told
were in
we
agreement,
were telling them, and we were
that
in
we
agreement.
knew
100%.
everything that was going on. Here's another example of what I'm talking about. Go look at any trafficking situation where they're trapping kids and abusing them. It is no different. They're going to say,
the
"Oh, well,
parents
your
know."
parents know about it, and we're just doing what your parents want." That's exactly what they did with our kids, and obviously we didn't know, or I would have done something about it.
yeah, so your daughter called you.
And she says, "I need to bring the kids to you," and I said, "Okay." And it didn't matter to me why or what reason. If she is bringing the kids, there's a reason. I had perfect trust in her, and she just didn't know that because none of them
this
trusted
point.
adults. They didn't trust any adults
this
because
point.
they've been so abused.
She's 22 and she'd been so knocked down she didn't even hardly dare trust herself. And she had been driven to the lowest point too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Kyle, what was the turning point on your side of it?
How did we contact them?
Yeah. What had happened to get to the point where your sister was able to bring you to your parents?
So in Colorado, at some point, we're going to start sinning. So that's to get us to non-members. They'll kick us out of the church because we're sinners. And so we contacted our brother. He was actually working, so he didn't. He knew it was happening, but he couldn't do anything. And so we contacted him because he had money because he worked.
And he had a truck.
He had a truck. He actually helped pay for the house we were living in, and he paid for most of it. And obviously, the other families living in there, they didn't really donate as much as they should. I mean, help as much as they should with the house. He was
They're taking advantage of.
taking advantage of it. Anyway, and so we're like, we want to get out. Can you help us get a house somewhere else out? And so so that's what we did. He helped us get a house. We moved to Minersville, Utah.
So to tell you who this is he's only the 18-year-old son who turned 18 after we were gone and had been put to work since he was 16 to support the whole family.
Okay.
Wow.
So at this point, and it's Kyle, was it all of the siblings? Was it all 8 of you together? All 8 of you decide that together, and then your 18-year-old brother was able to.
Arana essentially made the decision, and obviously she was our sister. She protected us. We loved her, We obviously wanted to get out, so, and she kept us together. So, anyway, so we moved to Minersville.
They formed quite a trauma bond, is what they did.
They still have to this day. It's still there.
Yeah, it became a matter of survival.
And so what Lola did is she went ahead and moved down into Richfield so she could keep tabs on us. And so we got away. It was better, but she would still come around, try to steal our stuff. That's all they wanted, is control over us.
So you're living in Minersville. You're in a different house, but there's that fear. How long were you there before your sister called your parents? And where were you during that? Like, how did you feel about your sister calling your parents?
So basically, Lola's like, okay, you're going to move in with Rachel. Because basically we went swimming in the river, and that was the worst thing you could ever do. And so
The 4 youngest kids, there's 4 younger ones.
yeah, and so she's like, we're going to
4
move in
youngest
with
boys.
Rachel. Keep in mind, Rachel's the worst. She's the worst.
And what
Of
she
them
was,
all.
so she
And
was trying to separate
trying to
them.
separate us from our sis Arana, which is basically her. She's basically protecting us, and so she's like, "No, it's not going to happen. I'm going to contact mom and dad. I'm going to send them to mom and dad so they can't go to Rachel and get abused even more." And and so my other sister reached out to a friend who had a number. I don't really know how she did it. I think she got on Facebook or something. And so she gave my sister the number, who gave it to Arana, who called Dad.
So you knew that was the plan, and
If there had anything to do with Facebook, though, we weren't on Facebook because there's no way we would have been on Facebook. We didn't get on Facebook clear till
That was pretty
way
tiny.
longer down the road. And I had people in Nebraska that were supposedly my friends saying, "Hey, when are you going to do this?" And I'm like, "I'll get a Facebook account about the time hell freezes over." And I couldn't tell them why. It's because I'm not going to make that compromise, so to speak, and lose my kids and lose out. So however anybody got the number, I mean, not that it really matters, and I don't know why I'm even defending myself about this, other than I guess I'm traumatized, but it wasn't because we were on Facebook.
Well, the truth was, we were told we had to change our phones too when we moved away. And so they didn't have any phone numbers. That's why there was no phone number.
At this point, you're still fully believing in Warren Jeffs, is that right? So you're
you're
still trying to get
earn
back.
your kids.
Like I said, it was a driving force. I believe in him all the more because I now always want my kids back.
Right.
But for me, when I got the phone call, then I didn't care what anyone thought. If she called me and said, "I have to bring these kids to you," then I didn't particularly care if so-called priesthood authority had anything to do with it or not. If she called and said, "We're doing this," there was a good reason, and I didn't need to know the reason.
This is probably the first time you ever thought of the possibility of them actually being in harm or actually being abused.
Yes,
Correct. And so I didn't question it. I didn't put up any resistance to it. I'm like, okay, great.
Well,
I
in
mean,
the first
what
place-
can I do? Where do you want to meet? I'll come down. I'll drive down there right now and get them.
In
What
the first
do we need
place,
to do?
we knew this daughter. We knew her and her character. And we knew exactly what she'd been like and how much care and affection she had for her own siblings. So we had no doubt in our mind that if she said they're coming, then it was a need and they needed help. So obviously, even though she didn't tell what it was, we immediately was like, okay, there is something not right.
Were you able to go get them together?
Yes.
Yes.
So together.
And for me, I didn't. It didn't matter what. I had no reason to ask questions why. It was like, if you're asking this, there is an absolute really good reason and no questions asked. So we're gonna do this. And I tried really hard to convince her to let me come clear down there and get them, and she said no. She said that they all want to say goodbye to their oldest brother, and he is in Denver, Colorado area, and so I'll meet you there. And which made so that she had to drive like 12 hours, and I only had to drive like 5. But that's what she wanted to do, so I'm like, okay, if that's what you want to do, that's what we'll do.
Jeff, really quick, what was the feeling that you had when you heard your daughter's voice again? Because at this point, you had no idea if you were ever going to see or hear from any of your children, I imagine.
It was a lot of emotion and elation, because it's always awesome to get to hear from someone, especially that you love so much with your whole heart and soul. And yet at the same time, obviously something bad happened, and it's a protection for your children, and so it's hard to describe what was going through my mind, other than whatever I can do to support and take care of this and take care of the people I love is what I am going to do, regardless of what it takes.
Yeah.
Like I said, there's no mountain high enough or ocean deep enough that's going to stop me.
It was the only thing we were living for, was
Exactly. Our kids is
The
all
only
we
thing.
lived for, period.
Literally.
Kyle, what was it like for you getting to see your parents for the first time?
I was scared, you know, because I was scared of adults, but at the same time, I was happy to see him. You know, it'd been 2 years, and they, you know, obviously, they said, hey, you know, your parents are dead. You know, you're never gonna see them again, and I did. So I was really excited about that, but I didn't show any emotion because that was a defense, you know.
Emotion at this point would have been beaten out of you,
Yeah.
considering what you had been through. So it's no surprise that it was hard to show emotion at that point.
When Kyle came to us, and if I tell this, is it gonna be too hard on you? Just let me know if it is. But he had literally that, no emotion. He didn't smile. He didn't open his eyes all the way. He just walked around very blank faced all day
Like
long.
this.
He didn't cry or frown. He didn't smile. Yeah. And I remember after a month, I was like, I called Jeff on the phone. Hey, I seen Kyle have an emotion today. He actually
Smile.
started to smile. So it was that, yeah.
Very
But
noticeable.
and later on, I asked him for what reason he didn't dare show emotion. And do you want to answer it, or should I go ahead?
Well,
What your reason was, what you told me
like
at
I
the
said
time.
before, it was a defense, you know.
Right,
if you-
defense. There you go. He's like,
you
he did
showed-
that.
Yeah.
If he smiled, he would get in trouble. If he frowned, he'd get in trouble. He was punished for whatever emotion he made. They were supposed to have no emotions and just do.
Besides the fact it was better off if you didn't show them any emotion, so they couldn't use it to manipulate or use you.
Use it against him.
Obviously, we can see emotion on your face, Jeff. That's the next question after asking Kyle. I know it's probably hard to even put in words as a parent, but in a couple words, what was it like getting to see your kids again for the first time?
Oh, how?
You know, I remember you had a whole box of gifts and you were just handing them out.
That was after we got back to the house. I had saved up gifts, but the first original, when I first originally seen them, my first thoughts were, oh my God, my kids are just like baby cats that have been tied up behind a wagon and dragged down a damn
They were,
mountainside. They just looked like ragged muffins, worn out.
Yeah.
You just,
even their clothes, they were
Depleted in
in
every way.
rags. I didn't leave them there in rags. They had clothes.
and they were
But
in the same clothes they had
pretty
been
much the
left
same
in
clothes.
2 years before.
Did you send us clothes when we were there?
Yes.
We did. We were told and promised by Lyle that we could send our kids stuff, and he would make for sure that they would get it. And we did that on several occasions, and then come to find out later, they never got one thing, not one thing that we sent. One of the boxes we sent, it cost over $500 just for the shipping charge to ship that box. It was so full of clothes and stuff that our kids needed, and they never got it.
So to answer the question though about what it was like to meet them again, and you probably have a different perspective if you tell it too, but for me, like that we met them in a parking lot, and they got out of the truck. They were all crammed in a truck, pulling a trailer, and they got out, and we didn't know how to feel. Nobody knew how to. They all were just silent standing there, and I'm just silent standing there like, what can I do? We're still afraid of being shocked or hit, or like, okay, if I'm emotional, then am I going to lose them? I mean, it was just still fear. And finally I realized, I looked at my oldest of the 4 younger kids, and he had changed quite a little bit in his look, and I had to ask him if he was one of my boys. I asked him if he was Kendrick, and he's like, yeah, I still am. He looked at me like I was for him too. And within a few minutes it was like, I'm like, God, give me a big hug. And I remember hugging my daughter. I just remember I could just feel pain just coming from her body. And yet I really hadn't even been told anything at this point. Obviously just the pain of being apart, but she was 13 or 14. So when they came out to us, then They brought all of the children. My oldest daughter did not come. She was afraid she would lose her salvation. She didn't dare bring, and she kept the
brought the
youngest
children
child.
out to us, but she went back to the
Yeah,
FLDS. What
she
she's
went
trying
back.
to
But
say.
she got away from Lola, kind of.
Yeah. And so at that time, there was my oldest son, my oldest daughter, and my youngest child that we didn't see for another good year and a half or more.
So your oldest daughter just wanted to get her siblings that she could tell were just being so awfully abused. She just knew she had to get them out, but she still believes so fully that she went back herself. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep. And then when she went back, then she was basically ostracized. Nobody would speak to her. Nobody would talk to her. Nobody
Because
would
of what
help
she'd
her.
done.
She'd done this terrible thing and taken her siblings to her awful, terrible parents who were just so wicked and terrible.
One thing that we mention to our viewers in situations where, these kids are, they're still kids being kidnapped, right? And abused and trafficked and all these things. And we've often said that getting children back to their parents is just the beginning of the process. It sounds so easy, like, oh, now the kids are back with their parents, so like life is good now, right? Do you mind sharing with people a little bit about the process of, like, Kyle, what was it like for you adjusting to having your parents back? And then parents, obviously, what some of the struggles of reuniting a family actually looks like, because that can be not all sunshine.
I didn't know how to feel. I guess. It was. I remember the first day. I was amazed. What it was the simplest thing. My mom was like, "Hey, do you want some bread?" And I was amazed that she offered me bread. That was just amazing to me. Blew my mind.
My observation was, and for good reason, they did not trust any adults. They did not trust us. They had been turned against us. And I am sad to say that because I did not understand the depth of what they went through, then I wasn't able to give them the type of support that they needed. Eventually I was, because when I figured it out, you better believe I gave it to them. But this young man right here was so bad off, so to speak, that I ended up getting a job driving truck and kept him right with me, which was a good thing. And we got very close, and I believe it was one of the things that helped him survive it and make it through it. But at very first, they didn't trust us, even to the point where because of the abuse they'd gone through, our first meal they wouldn't eat, and we didn't understand why. And I found out later that after the lights were turned out, that they all flocked down to the fridge and were just stuffing food in, because that was the normal. They didn't know if that we were going to start abusing them like they had been abused, because they were told that they were doing what the prophet wanted and the bishop wanted, and if they were, the abusers were, then their parents were going to do the same. In their mind, that's what they thought, and obviously that's not true, and we never would have and never did. But
they have to relearn that.
yes, they had to learn to trust us, and we actually had to suffer a lot of things that they did to us, so to speak, out of their anger, because they were angry because we had left them, and they didn't understand how trapped we were and why we would have. And it was just a whole process, and it took years. It took counselors. It took a lot, and we're on a path of healing. We're in a way better place. Obviously, Kyle wouldn't have come here tonight and shared this had he not been a lot more comfortable with his parents and been able to get through a lot of this. And so thank you, Kyle. You're very brave.
I think it's important to get the message out so people can help the kids that are in that situation. I don't want it to happen to anybody. Nobody deserves that kind of treatment.
What was the biggest struggle for you, Erna?
I think it's kind of interesting to think back on it, but going through losing them was a lot. But when I got them back, that's when the pain started. That's really when I mean, you know, and then there was just mountains of trauma that I was hearing. And I didn't want to miss one bit of it. I wanted to know exactly what they'd been through so I could help them.
And that's the first
It
thing
was-
we did is start
yeah.
telling you what happened.
And when they began telling me, and it took months, sometimes even years before I heard everything, or even if I ever have, but I'm just saying it took a long time for them to get it out, and then to realize that there was people that would hear them, first off. And I didn't even know how to describe it other than I was just in such disbelief. I was just like, how could this happen? How can children be treated like this? How could this actually happen? When, you know, and from all my beliefs, I was like, I had done everything right, as near as I could tell. Jeff had done everything. And then here, the worst of the worst happened to our kids. They had abuse, sexual abuse, mental abuse, starvation, physical abuse, and there was one more. But we literally got them.
That
They went
first
through
day,
CPS and they told us there's 5 major abuses. Go ahead.
that first day was the
First
best
day
day of my
out,
life. I
yeah.
actually got to pick food in
Yeah.
the fridge.
Yeah.
After 2 years of starving, it was the very best day of my life.
Yeah, and literally they're talking about starving, some of the stories they tell me about in Colorado, when they lived in Colorado, the one that really gets to me is when my 14-year-old told me that she had to eat the bark off of a tree to stay alive. She'd chew on the bark. And
And when we
they
got
had
food,
they didn't have food. They would leave them there for a long time. I think a month was the longest at one time, without a vehicle, without phones, without food,
Completely abandoned
and
them.
abandon them as punishments.
and when we did get food, it was like rice or vegetables, and you know, that's pretty much what it was.
So,
It's pretty hard to live on rice alone.
yeah, common question people ask us, well, how did they survive? I mean, for that long, but they would scrape driveways, get a little bit of money, and they would take that money and go to the dollar stores. You
In the
tell me
middle
if
of the
I'm...
winter without
Yeah.
enough coats to stay warm.
Some of them had skinny arms and learned how to steal from vending machines,
Yes,
which is really extremely
Sad
sad.
lady was still
I'm
in the
glad they were able to
machine.
get some type of food.
They
Would to
said-
God that I could have
yeah.
provided for them.
My daughters told me that they lived in, what's the city in Colorado?
Colorado Springs.
Colorado Springs, and my 2 daughters that were 13 and 14 would just roam the streets because they felt safer. And they said that there was a lady that would actually follow them and protect them because they would have guys following them. And she would actually look out for them, keep them and safe.
And they don't know who this lady was, or
They knew she worked at a certain store, so they'd kind of go to that store if they didn't feel safe. And she had watched people follow them, and they would literally check all the pop machines, they'd say, to see if there was any change. They would see if there was change in the gutter. When they did get any money, they described it like they would go buy candy with it because the sugar would keep them alive longer. That's what she told me. And they learned how to eat some of the plants. And like I said, they were scraping the driveways to get a little bit of money. And so some of the kids would tell me the neighbors kind of started noticing. Like when they came over and said, can we trade you these cupcakes we made for some noodles? Then they're like, okay, you know, anything else you need? And kind of started doing, and then at that point they invite them over. You can go and have hot chocolate. And
It was a thing. No, what happened is we were scraping the driveway. I offered to scrape the driveway, and they refused. But they wanted us. They offered us to let us in and have some chocolate
so
and
they,
stuff.
yeah. And so then they
And
remember.
that was bad, so we were scared to eat it. And
See,
so
'cause they weren't
most
supposed to
of-
eat it, but-
and we all refused until Leandra did, and basically she was the oldest, and so we're like, yeah, okay, we'll drink some. But it was sinning to drink chocolate. It was sweet. It's pretty much any type of sugar, you're sinning to eat it.
But so the neighbor actually kind of started noticing that there was a little bit of abuse going on, and then making sure they were being fed.
So I'd like to say that even though most people didn't understand at all what was going on, there are some very good people out there. And if any of the viewers happen across this that happen to be one of the people who helped take care of my kids, then I just want to say thank you. I really appreciate it. There's a lot of good people that help them a lot, and every one of you are important to me. I don't know who you are, it doesn't matter, but thank you for your kindness and your giving to my kids.
I think a lot of times, viewers ask, what can we do? Like, what can we do? And, you can't go out to a community and start taking the children back like you wish you could sometimes. And our biggest advice is just what you were saying, be that person. If you, they might not be kind and they might not be friendly to you because they have been taught their entire lives that you're, an evil outsider, but be kind, offer that cup of hot chocolate to that kid because you don't know the situation, and letting people know that there's good people outside the community can help open them up.
One way that I've looked at it and is after everything that these kids go through, they're almost like a wild animal in the sense that if you put a piece of bread out on your porch, they might come up and get it, but they're going to be afraid of you because of the way they were raised. And so just kindness. Don't expect them to run to you and ask for help, but the kindness of offering help and doing what you can is very much appreciated. So thank you all for the kindness that you show children. And unfortunately, this type of thing is still happening out there. I'm so grateful that all of you are together. You have your family back. Miraculously, you're all together, and so thankful for that. And I want to thank all of you out there that have helped these children as well. This has been a rough time for a lot of families from the FLDS.
I kind of wanted to end with, well, we'll start with Kyle, but if you could say one thing to people who are still in that community, and if you knew they would actually listen to you, what would you want to say to somebody that's still out there?
Reach out. Try to get help.
I would like to say that regardless of what you've been told, there are a lot of very good police officers. There are a lot of very good people out there. Reach out to the neighbors. If you see a cop, ask for help. See if you can get some help, because there are very good people out there who will help you, contrary to what you've been told all your life. Get the help you need and get out of the situation, because no child deserves to live in fear or in abuse.
And sometimes you don't realize you're being abused when you're in the moment.
Yeah.
I know, what about you?
I would say to all of you moms out there, don't leave your babies. Don't do it. You won't live through it. It will kill you. Don't leave them. Don't let anyone control who you associate with either. That's between you and your own heartfelt feelings, who your friends are, who your family is. It's your decision, not someone else's.
Well, thank you guys so much. Your family is such a beacon of hope that you can literally go through hell and go through the fire and make it out on the other side, right? You can have that hope, the hope that you guys grasped onto, and it might not have come out the way that you thought it was going to, getting your children back, but hopefully hopefully in a better circumstance where now you can have them in even a more beautiful way. So thank you guys for sharing your stories and inspiring all of us so much.
Yes, thank you for being willing and open to discussing this topic. I know it's very, very hard for all of you to discuss it. Thank you for being vulnerable and just being willing to share this. And hopefully it has helped you in some way to get some things off of your chest. And hopefully this will make a better outcome for some of these children out there today.
And encourage all those viewers out there. We thank you so much for your support. You want to continue to hear stories of people like the Black family and support them in sharing their stories, and want to hear more from lots of people about what it's like to grow up in polygamy, please like and subscribe. And we're thankful for your support and hopefully watching out for the children in your life around you.
Yes. Thank you all so much for being here. We look forward to seeing you soon.
Talk to you all soon.